Good evening. We're going to get started. If you want to come on in, please come in and join us. Don't miss it. Corral some folks here. Paging Alwin Springer, paging Patrick Long. It is my great pleasure. I'm Terry Cargus. I'm the executive director here at the Peterson Automotive Museum, and it's been my pleasure to be here now almost 9 years. And one of the great parts of this job is that we get to do things like this evening. I've been a Porsche fan since I was a young boy, and a couple of the real heroes of Porsche racing are here tonight. I'm going to introduce them in just a second. We've got Patrick Long, and Alwin Springer. Two verifiable Springer, the verifiable icons and heroes of Porsche racing. Did you have something that you wanted to mention, Patrick?
Yeah, I just want to say good evening to everybody. Prototype Giants and the 956, 962 is a great story that we're going to talk about tonight. Great to have Alvin here. In the lead up to this and in all the stories and data and history, Kerry Morris, a great friend who's here this evening and a legend in his own right and an owner of one of the cars you're going to see later, emailed today and said that Norbert Springer, one of the icons, engineers from Porsche, the head aerodynamicist of this program, had written in some words for this evening. And so I'm going to ask my friend Mark Hotchkiss from Luftgekuhlt and somebody that I met racing these cars in 2007 to come up and to read a few words from Mr. Norbert Springer.
Good evening, everybody. Going to read you a little bedtime story, but try and stay awake. And also, thank you all for coming here tonight. This is really special. You're going to see some amazing pieces of machinery downstairs, and I hope you all take part in the tour later on. All right, here we go. No practice. I'm going to go right into it cold. Words from the great Norbert Springer. The 956 car was developed in 9 months. A complete new chassis technology. Complete new aerodynamics with ground effects. Those are the tunnels under the car, which really worked compared to our competitors. Complete new engine, developed especially for fuel consumption. New gearbox, new suspension. We developed our own brake system, which was made completely in Weissach. The tire development by Dunlop was made specifically for the 956. All this was new and proved reliable, as we saw at Le Mans 10 months later. And that is an amazing stat. Le Mans, the first big race for the car, and there was the famous 1, 2, 3 overall. You guys all remember that or know the liveries, the Rothmans liveries, 1, 2, 3. Win an achievement which is still unique so far in racing today. In the end of the first season, we won the World Championship of Makes with Jackie Ickx, was world champion of endurance drivers. The car 956, 962 was elected by the English magazine Autosport as the best race car ever, and that means quite something. The 962 was in principle the same car as the 956, except a different wheelbase. The works cars continued successfully until 1988. This was at least 6 years of success with the same car in principle, which is quite unusual in racing. The 962 was made because of the safety regulations, as you guys will learn later on tonight when we do the tours. Maybe some people know the FIA regulation for Group C was consumption regulation, that's fuel consumption. And therefore, it was not just speed, it was also a technical challenge. The FIA modified the complete regulation for 1982 and introduced the categories of Group A, Group B, and Group C. Definition of Group C, quote, two-seater competition automobiles built specifically for race and on closed circuits. Not many people know that even Porsche people most assume C was for consumption. Some of the figures show the development which the Porsche racing department did with the car. Here are two comparisons showing the performance of the 956 and 962C between 1983 and 1986 on two famous racetracks. Page turn here, hang tight. First time, hang with me. Silverstone, England. We were nearly 2 seconds faster on average over the whole race in 1986 compared to 1983. And the fuel consumption was 23% less over the whole race. At Spa in Belgium, we were nearly 4 seconds faster in comparison between 1986 and 1983 over the whole race, and had 12% less fuel consumption over the whole race. This was quite a technical achievement which is not known to the public. Most people thought they are just cruising around effortlessly. This was quite a, it was done with the same chassis and further aerodynamic development, not just with aero styling elements of the bodywork, like a lot of customers did. It was done with real engine and management development and not just tuning. A lot of work in the details was done which was not seen from the outside, and therefore not in the public eye. With the Porsche Racing's successes in Group C, the production sales numbers went up to a record high of 50,000 cars per year in 1986. In 1982, they were just 30,000. And after Group C in 1988, they went down again below 30,000 cars per year. Group C racing helped Porsche in a positive way. Racing always has. From Norbert Singer.
Thank you, Mark.
So that sets up the evening about the cars. Now let me introduce the gentleman up here. Alwin Springer, one of the real heroes of Porsche racing, a legendary figure in Porsche racing, worked initially as head of Porsche racing vehicles for Waszek Polak in 1969, co-founded Endial in 1975, and was vice president for over 21 years, 1975 through 96, providing racing services to a wide spectrum of Porsche race car teams, including the Porsche 962s, which won 50 IMSA races in the mid-70s. Consultant to Porsche Motorsport NA North America in 90 to 96, president of Porsche Motorsport North America from 97 to 2004, then consultant again 2004 through the present. Welcome, Alwin. Quite a record. Astounding. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Patrick Long. Patrick is one of the most accomplished sports car racers of his generation. Since 2003, Patrick has served as the lone American on Porsche's roster of factory drivers. Long has captured victory at the world's biggest sports car races, winning at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the Rolex 24 at Daytona, 12 Hours of Sebring, Petit Le Mans, the 12 Hours of Bathurst. Long is also a three-time American Le Mans Series champion and two-time Pirelli World Challenge champion. Long is also creator of Luftgekuhlt, created as a celebration of air-cooled Porsches. Luftgekuhlt has become one of the most anticipated auto events of the year. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Let's start off with some easy ones. Where did you grow up and how did you get started?
I grew up in Essen, Germany. That's a little bit to the northern part. And how did I get started? In Toronto in 1966. before I immigrated in October 1965. And in Germany, I had nothing to do with racing at all. So I got started on an RS Spider at that time, and believe me, it was an eye awakening for me. But I like to see. That was the reason why I left Germany on a time base. I didn't want to immigrate. Just wanted to see the world a little bit and see America. But at the same token, we had the problem with Vietnam. So I decided, okay, Canada is very close to America. So might as well go there. Lake Ontario is in between, no problem. So, and then in Canada, I got started with Rudy Bartling in the winter time. I got there in 66. So in racing.
Patrick?
Yeah, I grew up in Southern California, the suburbs of Los Angeles, and just was a car crazy kid. My dad, who's here today, and his little brother grew up in the hot rod era of Burbank, Glendale. My grandfather went to high school and drove a Model A, and they had go-karts in the 60s, in kind of the heyday and the founding days of go-karts. And fast forward 30 years, and I was 6 years old and got my first go-kart, and the rest is history, as they say. So chased the dream of one day racing a professional race, and never would have imagined I would be able to spend 2 decades with this awesome company, Porsche. So just still riding a wave and waiting to wake up.
And it is a general question, why is California so important to Porsche racing?
In my opinion, when you look at California, we had the most street cars sold here. And it is the sunshine almost. Florida, you can take the same, but there you have the rust. Here in California, we don't have it. So in my opinion, it's something very, very important to the street side. And on the racing side, it's clear we have a lot of people here who just want to go out, have a good time. And the weather is always there because you go back to the rest of the country. It doesn't work. They have the winter time and everything else.
Patrick, how did you meet Alwin?
So right when I was introduced to the Porsche family of motorsport, I had done a test at the end of 2002. It was looking good that I was going to be offered a position on the team. They had what was called the UPS Junior Team. It was sort of their farm league of developing young drivers. And they invited me to their year-end gala, and Mr. Springer had come over from Southern California where he was running Porsche Motorsport North America. And I remember it was an Italian restaurant on a train track in the middle of Weissach, and it was a cold, dark night, and I walked in, and I was introduced to Alvin, and he was sitting in the back corner, and I remember Uwe Bredel said, "Alvin, he's American, like, say hello to him." And then Alvin just looked across the table at me, and he looked at Alvin, and he said, "But is he quick?" So on my first introduction to Alvin, I knew that I needed to kind of work on my introduction, I guess.
So one of my questions was, how is it to work with Alwin? I guess that pretty much covers it.
Well, no, it's better than that. The partnership that you want in motorsport, first of all, Alvin is a racer, and you can't learn about racing. You can't read about it in a book. You either are or you aren't, in my opinion. First and foremost, Alvin's a family man. He's loyal. He's someone who gives it to you straight, never beats around the bush. We've had a few hard conversations in the last few years, but I always know where I stand, and it's incredible to, as a young driver, you want to know where you stand. You want to know what is needed less. And when you win and when you lose, we all come together and celebrate, and that's the best thing you could ask for as a driver.
As one of the men that helped make these cars so successful, why do you think Patrick has been so successful, maybe more than other drivers?
Patrick is unique. I mean, some of you people know him, and I have seen a lot of race car drivers. They have talent, but they have no personality, or they have a lot of things, and Patrick just has everything. He is very good at the race. He's a very good driver, very good in front of the camera, very pleasant, and a good guy. And that's what I feel what makes him special to the rest of the other drivers what I know.
Alwin, in your opinion, is there a race that's the toughest on the cars that because of the track and that not just the length of the race, but all of the stresses and demands on the car?
Yeah, there's only one racetrack, and that's Sebring. I mean, Sebring used to be, during the Second World War, you know, they built, they trained all the bombers who came to us and uploaded their load. But, you know, after the war, they had an airfield and didn't know what to do with it, and put a racetrack on there. And now, over the years, you know, the concrete is kind of, how can I say, shifting. So driving there, and maybe Patrick can tell you more about it, but it's a challenge for a driver and definitely for a car.
Patrick, what's your toughest track?
Well, definitely Sebring is most physically demanding. It's bad news when you get an email that we're going to go do an endurance test for 12 hours or 24 hours at Sebring. But as Alvin said, it tests the car, it tests the driver. Audi used to roll up on Monday after Sebring. They'd give their guys about half a day off after working long into the night on Saturday. And Monday morning, they were testing the R8s, the R10s, the R15s that were so successful at Le Mans, because they knew if they could do 24 hours at Sebring, Le Mans would be easy, just based on how it shakes the suspension, tests the gearbox, the axles. It's one of the toughest tracks, but I would say that the Nürburgring Nordschleife tests the driver more than the car. It's so dark, it's so slippery, it's such a long track, 200 race cars on the circuit at once, and just the speed differentials and how treacherous it is from where the grass to the wall is. There's really no margin for error.
How would you describe, or what would be your toughest race, your most memorable race?
Ooh, back to Sebring last year, and in 2005, we lost suspension. We had a damper failure in both races, and we were able to still achieve class victory in both of those races. And I tell you, it's a bumpy enough place with good suspension, but with a failed damper, it's a long day at the office. It's hot, it's humid, and it came down to the final stint in 2020. We went down for the final restart with 15 minutes to go, and we were able to capitalize on some contact ahead of us and bring home a victory. And I can tell you, winning when you're 21 or 22, you take it for granted. It's what you got paid to show up to do. But when you're pushing 40 and you're racing against 21-year-olds, it's that much sweeter.
Alwin, we heard what Norbert Singer said about the cars. What do you think made the cars so successful? How would you describe that?
Yeah, okay, now we have to differentiate a little bit between the 962 and the 956. So which one, the 962? The 956, because it wasn't really a car I ever worked on it, because we never saw it in the United States. So my expertise is more on the 962. So what made the car so successful, I can tell you that it was designed by Norbert that a customer could buy the car and feel comfortable in it. Because at that time we had a combination between rich people and a fast professional. And the two of them, you know, worked together, and we won races in different teams, different classes, and yet the private guy would feel comfortable in the car, and that was very important. Because in today's world, the private guys have a hell of a time adapting to the new race cars, I can tell you that. So for me, overall, it was very reliable, fast, a very good car.
How long would it take to modify the 962, or how long did it take?
Yeah, it depends what you call modifying. So I would take as an example the Al Holbert car. So we got the car from the factory, but like Norbert always said, in Germany they had, or in Europe, they had mostly fuel consumption races, and over here we didn't have that. So we could use fuel whatever we want. So first thing what we did is we increased the engine capacity, and then the intercoolers, and the turbocharger, and. So how long did it take? I would say in '84 was our major thing, but the development continued until the '86s.
Patrick, Alwin has described you as a driver. How would you describe a good driver and a good team?
Yeah, the resource behind you, the human resource and the engineering and the development, it's all plays on the driver's confidence. In the end, when you have to hold it flat into a very quick blind corner, or you have to send it into the inside of your opposition when it's all to play for, I believe that the people behind the scenes fuel you in whether you're going to fill that hole or not. You know, working with Alvin on the 962-001 when we rolled that car out 3 years ago, it was incredible to work with Alvin with a clipboard and a stopwatch. Eric Bloss, who's in the room, Derek, a lot of the Porsche Motorsport team were there. And these are guys that worked on the cars when they were modern, and they now restore them. And, you know, we rolled the car out. It had Andretti on the side. I strap in. Alvin puts his head inside the cockpit and says, here's the RPM I want to see. Here's the feedback I want, and let's go. And that's what you want from your team. You want preparation. You want direct communication. And you want a car that you can trust. And I can tell you that is still, to this day, the best car I've ever driven. The downforce, as Alvin talked about, is so confidence-inspiring. But I'm just a huge fan of turbos. And when that car, that you're going to see about 7 examples of them, when it comes on boost, it's just mesmerizing. It really is rewarding to the driver because it is so much about timing. It's not always crisp. It's not always clean. So you have to really time things, and it's really art before it is driving.
You raced for Penske in the RS Spider and the GTP cars. Tell us the differences.
Yeah, racing with Roger and Penske in the RS Spider days, that was 2006 through 2008. And in those 3 seasons, we were the giant killers in typical Porsche fashion. Smaller displacement, lighter weight, smaller wheelbase. Just as the original Porsches that were designed in the mountains of Austria, we were quick in the corners, but we didn't have the displacement or the big horsepower or the wheelbase. And so we had to fight like hell to beat the Audis and to beat the Acuras. Jumping into a 962 or a 956 was much more my style as a driver because you had more power at times than you could use. That was never the case in the RS Spider. The RS Spider, you were always pushing every single time that you hit the track. It was 100% to try to keep the RPMs up. But when you go back to the development that Alvin and the Andile team, the Porsche team did on these cars, they had tremendous torque. And as Alvin referenced, in the IMSA days of GTP, it was the Wild West. You didn't have a lot of displacement or fuel limitations. And so these guys were pushing the envelope on horsepower. And most of the time, that's good news for a driver, but you do need a car that'll handle and stop to complement that power.
Alwin, did the real horsepower numbers ever get reported accurately?
I give you a good story. So in the beginning, we wanted to be the nice guys, and we would give the people our dyno sheets, the customers, show them everything really from an honest standpoint. And then people came back and they said, you know, like Willie around the corner, you know, he has 50 more horsepower than we have. How can that happen? What are you going to do? And after a while, you know, I really got miffed. And I said, look, guys, do me a favor. Watch it at the racetrack. If the other guy's faster, okay, fine, come back again. Otherwise, leave me alone. And then on top, no more dyno sheets. So did we ever tell really things? I would say in the best days, we had about 760, 770. But it was, of course, short term. You know, 24-hour race, you couldn't do that. But in the short races with the overboost, we definitely had that.
For both of you, what made Porsche so unique as a motorsports customer supplier? The at-track and the development that they would give or provide to the teams. That it seems that they have mastered that early, and had always been the best. Is that accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Because if you go back, you know, Porsche customer racing started a good 50, 55 years ago. And we never let off. You know, we supported always the teams. We always had spare parts from our race cars. We had the spare parts available. You could call. It was not like the Ferrari, and nothing against the company. But you have a Ferrari and you want to have a spare parts, you could wait 6 months. And we didn't have that. From the beginning, we had a catalog, support at the racetrack. And I tell you, our Porsche Motorsport in today's world is absolutely the top of the class. And I think a lot of other manufacturers would love to have something like that. So yes, I say Porsche Motorsport, that's supporting the customers and the growth, it will continue.
Who was behind that at the factory?
When? In the beginning or right now?
Well, in the beginning and then through the years, because it's been so successful for so long.
It's part of a division in Vlacht in Weissach, but it's customer racing, or customer sport. It's a complete, I don't know, approximately, I would say 50 people, 80 people working there, and they're supporting the parts, the logistics, everything else. So it's nothing like, okay, you can call up and you say, do you have something? And they look now, catalog, yes, and you have it within a reasonable time. So exactly who started it, that I don't remember.
And Patrick, on the driver development program and bringing younger drivers along, how did that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was the chance that I received that changed my life and changed my career. UPS, the shipping company, had stepped up on a global level and invested in 2 cars. And when I joined that team, it had been only German drivers to that point, but I was given the chance to join that team, live in Weissach, go to the factory daily, full immersion from language to long hours at the office, whatever needed to be done. I spent my lunch breaks at the library trying to understand what a 956 was, what a 962 was, what a 718 was. There were just numbers everywhere. It was wild when I first arrived. But to answer your question, in today's day, it's my chance to give back for the mentoring that I received from a lot of the factory drivers that brought me along. I remember going to Le Mans in 2004 as a rookie, and I was the complete liability of the 3 drivers because I had never been to the track. It was the favored car to win. It was the factory-backed effort. Roland Kuzmal, another legend of these cars that you'll see tonight, was the race engineer, and they were almost laughing because the whites in my eyes, I just was so shocked by how fast the track was. But Sascha Maas and Jörg Bergmeister were my teammates, and they were the senior members of the team. And that's kind of my role these days. I'm not the quickest guy on the roster, but I have to hold my own against them, but I also have to help guide them. And also with our new young drivers, the PM&A team that's here this evening, we had a call on Monday about the next driver from the US, from the Porsche Carrera Cup North America, that we're going to send to Europe to do the test that I did almost 20 years ago. So it's a family of motorsport. As Alvin said, it's all about the customer racing. The bread and butter may be when we have a factory-entered program, but just like the 956 and the 962s, the cars that you'll see, there's 1 factory car or 2 factory cars, but the rest are customer cars. And those cars won massive races under the Al Holberts of the world, AJ Foyt, and the Brumos team, the Copenhagen car that you'll see. So always in parallel, even now with the LMDH, which is the next generation prototype that's coming in 2023. The conversations that I've been privy to, yes, Penske is coming back. They are going to run a WEC program globally. They're going to run in IMSA, but also there will be factory-supported teams right alongside Penske, and that's what it's all about. I love that there's kind of that equal opportunity to show up. Yes, somebody in this room could walk up and, with the right qualifications, enter into the next generation of prototype racing.
Alwin, are you involved now in the historic racing, at vintage racing? Is that right? How does that feel to be back in the dyno room?
I can tell you it feels very, very good. At PM&A, we started the historic department, and we have in the beginning it was a little bit on the rough side because you have to think back the parts, the information, everything. But after a while, it is amazing how your brain works. You know, you see something, and while we're doing that, and it is Eric Bloss is somewhere here, the two of us, we do it, and it is amazing how the brain all of a sudden goes, yes, that's how we do it. And then I got some information from 1971, so that helps also, and then the basic experience. And a dyno, it's special. A dyno, I really like to be there because that's the heart of everything else. And I see Chris sitting there. So Chris, you know, the two of us, we have sometimes good arguments, but at the end of the day, when we get our things done. So yes, I enjoy it very much.
What made Andile so unique?
Andile, it was the three people. It was Dieter Inzenhofer, Arnold Wagner, and myself. We were all 100% dedicated to the company. That's all what we did. Arnold did the parts department and the office. Dieter did the workshop. I did the workshop in the beginning, and then later on I split up and did the racing. But yet, the three of us would be, I would say, from a owner standpoint, absolutely on the same level. And we were able in racing, in the street, we were very successful also. But in racing, we were able, sometimes with the factory help, but from our side too, and with some good drivers and teams like Jim Busby, B.F. Goodrich, Rob Dyson, just to name a few. Al Holbert was definitely a very, very big part of our success. And it's something where Andile shined. And like you said before, we had 4.6 years, 50 victories, and we did 49 engines. So that's pretty remarkable in that 962 days.
Patrick, when did you become aware of Andile and what they were up to?
Yeah, the heritage of Andile has been a part of everything that I've read and studied from those first few days when I showed up to Weissach. And at first you see the logo, then you start to understand the successes and the history, and you really realize that Southern California has a massive part of the Porsche Motorsport story, and that was where Andile was from. So it was interesting for me because I was a Southern California native, but I was living in Europe, so I came straight over to Germany. So I was learning about the California culture of Porsche and motorsport and what was going on in IMSA from afar. And then in 2003, I got the call to go do my first petite, and that was when I finally walked into Alvin's office and had my first speech about not screwing up on the racetrack. So no, it's been a fun ride.
How would you suggest that somebody who wanted to start working on engines or racing cars get started now, and where would you send them?
Yeah, send them is a different story. I would strongly suggest, you know, like I believe we had it, and if you don't have it anymore, it's kind of a time where you work at PMNA, Porsche Motorsport, and get your feet with it. But you know, it's a difficult situation in today's world, because in the old days you could do a lot of things on the race engine, could learn like I did. But in today's, it's also sophisticated. It's computers things. It's not what the old world was all about. So right now, I would suggest strongly start working in a shop and get to know the engines, get the chassis, get the things to know, and then try to go with a racing team. But it's I don't want to say impossible, but it's very, very difficult to get into it.
Patrick, how would you suggest a young driver or someone who wants to look ahead at a career as a driver, what would you recommend as a beginning?
Yeah, breaking into the racing, I get that question quite often from young drivers, especially through social media. And the two tools that they have at their disposal that we didn't have was sim racing online. Gives you a great immersion into the racetracks and the different types of cars at a low cost and a low risk. And indoor karting, you don't have to make the upfront investment in owning all the equipment. But if you go to some of the higher level indoor kart tracks, there's an amazing amount of competition. But the Porsche Experience Center gives you a lot of opportunities, especially from being from Southern California, to go down to Carson and to be on track with key race-inspired, race-experienced drivers and curriculum. They have a sim center as well, so there are places locally for the Southern California customers of all ages. But in the end, we all have started in karting, and I always think that the racecraft is best learned wheel to wheel.
Doesn't our friend Mark have something to do with the Porsche experience locally here?
Yeah, Mark Hotchkiss is a family member of Luftgekuhlt, a great driver himself, and also I would just call him the chief down at the PEC. Scott Bartlett, who's next to him on the left, both run the show down there, and will give you a great experience. If you haven't been, I'm sure a lot of you in the room have been, but if you haven't, I actually went down and took the course myself, and you might laugh about that, but I learned a lot, and I was challenged by how tight and how quick it was to go in a GT3 in some of those sections, so very enjoyable.
We've only got time for a couple more questions, but Alwin, how excited are you about e-racing, electric racing?
You really want to know that? You said we only can have a couple of questions, so I can tell you with one thing, I'm very, very glad that happened at the end of my career. So let somebody else do that.
Enough said, enough said. Patrick, tell us about Luftgekuhlt.
Luftgekuhlt is an experiential air-cooled Porsche show. Long story short, I bought a 1986 3.2 Carrera and started driving it around town and just wanted to meet up with other people who had vintage 911s and talk about the cars and talk about the wing and the tire and the stance. And I couldn't find really any weekend shows. There was Cars and Coffee down in Irvine, but when I said to my wife, Lauren, do you want to wake up at 5 a.m. on Sunday and go down to Orange County to look at cars? She looked at me like, keep moving. So we decided to have a show that started at 10. It had tacos and beer. Families and dogs were welcome. And we just wanted to tell a story of what the phrase air-cooled was and to walk around with 40 cars that were curated and discuss what the difference between an Outlaw and a concourse car was, and a 356 versus a 914, and then it just took a life of its own. And in this day and age, it's a year-round brand. We're a experiential design brand. We do a lot of shows for other people as well as our annual gathering, and we have a lot of fun. We're producing some great merchandise. Our second book is here for sale. I won't do too much pushing of product, but we're really proud of our book because it tells stories through photography of each one of our shows. The first book told the story of the first 3 shows here in Southern California. The second book, directed by Jeff Swart, who couldn't make it this evening, but definitely wanted to be here, just tells the story of this whole show ramping up. But from 40 cars to, I'd say, over 1,000 cars at the Lumberyard in Torrance in 2018. So it's been a wild ride. We just try to keep up with it. We've had a few pre-event parties here on the rooftop, and thanks to you guys for hosting us through that. But yeah, just trying to keep up with it.
Let me ask you. The first Luftgekühlt we were in Santa Monica.
Yeah,
remember?
Venice.
How many cars? Not 40 cars.
40, yeah?
No,
Well,
come on.
What we didn't bargain on was the power of Instagram. So there was a parking lot that in a normal business day parks about 15, 20 cars if you've been to Deus, right there on Venice and Lincoln on the corner, and it's a pretty busy thoroughfare. So there was a bit of a traffic jam that morning in 2014. People told me that as far as the eye could see down Lincoln, there were Porsches parked on both sides. It looked like a Porsche parade on Lincoln Boulevard, but yeah, again, just trying to live up to the following that this brand has and this product speaks to everybody in this room. But also Southern California is the unfair advantage. We've toured all around the world, and Southern California has more Porsche passion than anything I've ever seen.
But I have to say, but I still have to say something, you know, like he's talking about a lot of cars in the first outing, and I'll tell you, I remember that Patrick Dempsey came, and I think that was because of him.
I don't know if he's still here this evening, but we can, you can come up and say hello. But yeah, I mean, he's the unfair advantage, right? So always great to have Patrick as a part of the Porsche family. I've had him along for Luftgekuhlt from the beginning. Magnus is here. He's been there from day one. Thank you to him. And it's just a family. You know, going to Le Mans with Patrick in 2013, and for him to look across the table at me and tell me that his life passion is to be on the podium at Le Mans. For a driver who's kind of spoiled and does that for a living, and it's just another day at the office, it's such a gift to be able to go through that experience with Patrick, and we've had lots of trials and tribulations at that race, but to finally get up on the podium in 2016, it was the most emotional moment of my career, because I saw somebody realize their life dream, and I was a small part of it, and that's what these experiences are all about. I think the motorsport is the vehicle, but the connections and the people are what the real victory is.
Well, if you see how often we have Porsche experiences and events here, I think you get an idea of what some of our favorite cars are. And I think you may or may not know, Wolfgang Porsche is on our board of directors as an honorary board member. In fact, he's sending Ferdinand, his son, over for our gala this year on November 20th. So we're excited about that. I want to do a shout out to Michael Bodell, our Chief Operating Officer, who's helped create the relationship with Luftgekuhlt and directs this, runs our business here. So thank you, Michael, and his team. We're blessed here. We have a wonderful museum. We've been voted world's best twice in the last 5 years. We opened the James Bond exhibit downstairs to great acclaim. It's one of the best we've done in a long time. I don't think it tops the 70th anniversary of our Porsche celebration. We're already talking to Porsche in Germany, Porsche AG, about the 75th anniversary show that we'll do. But we're gonna send everybody time to go downstairs, Michael? First group? Okay. So are the bars still open? Is that all important? Yeah? Okay. Well, thank you all very much, so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Hotchkiss. I'm here at the Peterson Automotive Museum within the vault, and I'm here to take you on a tour of Luftgekuhlt's latest display, Prototype Giants, featuring the infamous Porsche 956, 962, and 962C. So let's start with the 956. In 1981, Porsche gave the green light to return to Le Mans for an overall victory. Hence, the 956 was created, the brainchild of Norbert Singer. This car was all new in design and running gear. It carried over the engine pretty much from the 936. But this is it. This 956 in white was one of the earliest cars, and it features a aluminum monocoque tub, aerodynamics under the 956 that people often refer to as tunnels to help kind of sucked the car to the ground. It incorporated really elegant aerodynamics over the top of the car to the rear wing, which kind of reminds me of the 917-30 rear deck, the way it swoops up into this massive main plane on the rear wing. Driver's side on the right, powered by twin turbocharged engine, and shifting a synchro mesh 5-speed gearbox. So this was earlier in the days before sequential shifting, and drivers utilized a 5-speed synchro gearbox. So interestingly enough, on this car, the driver was set very far forward in the car, and hence their feet went beyond the front axle line. And that point's really important for a future conversation we'll have. But this is it, the beginning of the 956-962 era, as Norbert Singer led this car back to Le Mans in just 9 short months from design to its first win at Silverstone. And here we are with the iconic Coca-Cola livery, made famous in American sports car racing by Bob Akin. We remember Bob Akin as a stalwart in IMSA racing, from sports cars of all kinds and types, and eventually into prototype racing. He was joined by the likes of Hans Stuck, Joe Gartner, Jim Mullen, and others, making this car always competitive. This particular Aiken car is a very early 962, and you can see an example, a key cue to that is this rear deck lid. This is the rear deck lid of a very early 962. We also have side intercooler on this car, so we have this nice smooth rear roof line. But also with this early car, it ran the smaller displacement engine. Remember, an air-cooled single turbocharged engine, single plug actually, and that evolved to the twin plug higher displacement engines, and those were primarily the key from Andile that made that tremendous horsepower, very dependable, several wins in IMSA GTP category. This is a fantastic example of a livery we're all familiar with and a name we're all familiar with. And that's what Porsche really wanted. They wanted those privateers to run these cars. So you've got Aiken, Levin, the Holbert Group, Hotchkiss, Dyson, Busby, the list goes on. And the same in Europe. You've got Brune, Yost, Richard Lloyd Racing, Kramer, the list goes on there. And that's what made the 962 such an amazing vehicle. So many of them running at the same time. They were the ultimate workhorse of the prototype era. In 1982, the 956 dominated in Europe and won overall at Le Mans and also the championship races as well. As the car became more popular and it was seen that it would be an advantage to have it in America, competing in the IMSA GTP series, it became clear that based on IMSA's recommendation, there needed to be a small design change to the 956. And what it needed to qualify for GTP competition was to have the wheelbase lengthen very slightly, but enough to allow the driver's feet to remain at the front axle line or behind it. Unlike the 956 with a shorter wheelbase, and the driver's feet protruded beyond the front axle line, that car evolved into the 962. The 962, which debuted at the 1984 Daytona 24-Hour. So here we have an example of a 962C, lengthened wheelbase, and in the Rothmans colors, we all remember this livery very well. This livery is associated with dominance in Europe. Le Mans victories, several championships. This car has a slightly increased engine displacement, but still retains the twin turbocharged architecture. still retains the overall aerodynamics and body design of the 956. Slight aero changes here and there, but overall, the beginnings of the 962 in Europe, here we have it, the 962C. 956 and 962 engines operated within a displacement range of 2.65 liters all the way up to 3.2 liters. They were all either twin turbocharged, as what started with the 956 in Europe and the WEC. But when the 962 debuted in the United States, it debuted as an air-cooled single turbo engine at 2.8 liters. Interestingly enough about that air-cooled engine, it was a single plug engine, and in the United States, in GTP specifically, that engine eventually increased in displacement and also became a twin plug engine as well. The engines were operated initially by mechanical injection and then quickly transitioned over into Bosch Motronic versions as the 962 and 56 evolved through the years. Here you have a great example from Porsche Motorsports North America. And if you have a chance, take a really close look at this engine. It is beautiful. One of the most important points Porsche wanted for the 956 and 962 was that it eventually became a customer car. Why not produce these cars en masse? Yes, you have your factory efforts, but also support that with privateers. So here's a great example from Team Schuppen. This is a 962C that competed in both Japan and the United States. And what's neat about Porsche allowing privateers to run these cars is that these teams could really take a look at the architecture and foundation, and per the rules of the series that they ran in, they could modify the cars, perhaps change a little bit of the suspension geometry, some aerodynamics. So here's a great example from Team Schuppen where we have a 962 with a short tail and a center-mounted rear wing, as opposed to the earlier cars we looked at with the more traditional Porsche rear deck. Continuing along the lines of privateers owning and running 962s, here's a great example from Kramer. This is the famous Leighton House livery that we've seen often in Formula One and in sports cars. This is a gorgeous car, and what the Kramers did so well is they took the design and aerodynamic elements of the 962 and they further developed it into their own style with a lot of great aerodynamic treatment to this vehicle, including some structural rigidity that they added to the chassis, and again, a short tail 962 with a center mounted rear wing, and all of that improves the speed and performance of the 962. Here's a great example of a privateer team that ran a 962 in IMSA's GTP class. This is an A.J. Foyt-owned Brumos-run 962. This car has that famous Copenhagen livery and also features the infamous drivers from back in the day. Of course, you've got A.J. Foyt, Hurley Haywood, Alan Sir Jr., Elliott Forbes Robinson. They all piloted this car. This car primarily appeared in Florida races, endurance races. What's unique about this car is that it retains the later 962 tail, but ran the side intercooler design. So the intercoolers on IMSA cars were either on the side, within the side pod, or they were overhead with a giant scoop in the rear deck lid. This is a beautiful car. Take a close look at it when you visit the museum. It has some fantastic details to it. And here we are, the Porsche 962's 50th win. This is the Daytona winner from 1989, owned by Jim Busby in the Miller High Life livery, piloted by Derek Bell, John Andretti, and Bob Wallach. This is it, the ultimate evolution. There are so many details about this car that differ from the original factory cars. It's tremendous. Keep in mind that Porsche made their own chassis or tub, but there were other manufacturers who also developed the Porsche factory tubs. For example, Chapman, who did this tub on this Miller High Life Busby car. You have Dave Clem, Fab Car, Kramer, Broom, Yost. They all took the Porsche tub and modified it in certain ways to get advantages out of it. For example, rigidity. But this car, recently restored by Mike Colucci, who, by the way, was the car chief for this vehicle at Daytona that year in '89. This car is so full of details. For example, the entire rear section of this 962 features a shorter cut rear deck, massive lower wing on the rear end. And the reason they were able to do this is because they took advantage of everything we can't see underneath this car. So torsional rigidity, the tunnels are a little bit different, all providing a different balance to this car. Another interesting detail about this Miller High Life Busby 962 is that the front nose is very similar to that of a 956. So the 962 nose is shorter overhang, and the folks at Busby went back to a 956 style longer nose, and this probably helps aerodynamically, putting some aero downforce on the front because now they've got so much efficiency in the rear. All kinds of duct work on this car, different aero bits, scallops in the front wheel well. This car, along with all of the other, or most of the other 962s in the IMSA paddock, engines were serviced by Andile, led by Alwin Springer. They produced great horsepower, they were dependable, and like this very 962 that won Daytona, the Sunbank Daytona in 1989, many victories under the Andile banner. I hope you enjoyed our tour of Prototype Giants here at the Peterson. I know I enjoy seeing the lineage of the 956 and the 962 and all of the differences between the cars themselves and the tremendous history behind these cars and Porsche's effort to once again dominate the prototype world. Come on down to the Peterson. We're located in the vault, and the show is open through November. See you here.